at least if you had an opportunity to participate in the debate, maybe you wouldn't feel so bad. Maybe you wouldn't be so angry and feel so powerless. So I got thinking, like, this doesn't make any sense. So I started looking, and I thought, like, what about Article the First? Now, let me explain to you what Article the First is. The cut, the meat. In late August of 1789, Madison's proposal was resoundingly rejected by the House. Not because they didn't want to change the manner in which apportionment would be handled in the future, but because it didn't go far enough. So what the whole House ultimately did is they passed a three-line, three-step process, reducing it to a numbers game. It is a mathematical equation, and it is very simple. You have one representative for every 30,000 people until you reach 100 representatives. Then at that point, the ratio increases to you have one representative for every 40,000 people. And then when you reach 200, the ratio goes up to you never have more than one for every 50,000 people. Okay? Do you understand what I'm saying? There's a census population of 320 million people in this country. And according to what Congress wanted, demanded, and the only compromise they would accept was that there would never be a scenario, never, where you would have one representative for every 750,000 people, or in Montana, one for every 1.3 million people. It was intended to be a specific constitutional guarantee. Now, if that were enacted into law, that would mean today we would have an excess of 6,000 people in the House of Representatives. Just follow me, just bear with me for a moment. The Electoral College would be 6,200 and change, or whatever. And everyone said, oh, that's bigger government, I'm against bigger government. I said, I'm against bigger government too. I'm in favor of bigger democracy. The government is the bureaucracy, not the people's house. You know that China has in excess of 3,600 people in their functional equivalent of our House of Representatives? We have one of the worst ratios on the planet, yet we contend that we are the leaders in democracy. It's all a lie. But what I'm about to tell you is the worst lie of all. Like everyone else, I believed what I was taught in school. I believe my teachers knew what they were talking about, and I believe they thought they knew what they were talking about. And when I was in law school, I said, I'm aware of this Article the First thing, because most people, if I were to ask you about the Bill of Rights, because at the end of the day, there were 12 proposals that Congress passed on to the states. Now, I'm not making this up. I'm going to, that's around the board, because but I'm going to wait till I explain the process. There were 12 proposals, not 10, okay? Because the warm and fuzzy history we're taught in school today is, oh, everyone agreed to the Constitution, and then they said, oh, we should have these 10 amendments that are the Bill of Rights, and all 13 states ratified them, and isn't that cool? Isn't that nice? Let's all smile. The only problem with that is it's an absolute lie. Now, starting from the onset, there were 12 proposals. What we today call the First Amendment was actually the third. It wasn't the first most important. It wasn't the second most important. It was the third most important. The first most important was the guarantee of representation in Article the First. And in fact, it was put first because it was the most important. Because if you don't have fair and adequate representation in your government, everything else is an illusion. It's window dressing. There's a line I have to say, don't pee on my head and tell me it's champagne. I know the difference. Okay? And what's occurring today is pretty akin to that. So the amendment process starts, and Congress passes these 12 amendments through this legislative process. The House originally wants 18, the Senate reduces it to 12, they're disagreeing, they have a committee that meets, they finally agree upon them. The last 2 days as Congress is going out of session, this was the least important thing on the members of Congress's mind. They were trying to form a judiciary, they were trying to form the executive departments, the Department of Foreign Affairs that ultimately became the Department of State, the Treasury Department, the Department of War, have an Attorney General. Those were viewed as pretty important, and more important than let's tamper with the document that we haven't even gotten off the ground yet. But Madison made his campaign promise, and he delivered. So you have to know how things develop. Because again, 95% right makes you 5% wrong. If you know how it developed, you know where everything went wrong. But first I'm going to do the count, and I'm going to go back and tell you how everything went wrong. Before I do that, I'm going to explain how we teach it wrong today. Now, that's why I wrote these books. These books are rare. They're also the books you will find in the United States Supreme Court, in the U.S. Attorney General's office, and every good law library in the nation. Because if you have a question about the Bill of Rights, so to speak, you will go to a 2-volume treatise printed and published by Macmillan and Company in 1971 with the author, or the chief editor, being Professor Bernard Swartz of New York University School of Law. Pretty impressive place. When I was young, he was one of my people that I looked up to because he studied the same stuff that I did. I read everything that he wrote. So when I was in law school, I thought, I've always taken it on faith. I'm always told, because unlike other people, I knew that there were 12 proposals, not 10. I said, I've never seen for myself that these first 2 really didn't get ratified. So I went back, and of course I went to Professor Bernard Swartz's book, which is what was available to me. At that time, I had not gone into the National Archives in Washington, as I have since done, or into the various state archives, as I have since done. And I believed it as true. And at page 1203, Professor Bernard Swartz, which I'm going to pass this book around, look at it yourself, because this is the book the United States Supreme Court itself relies upon. And it's wrong. And it's even worse. Okay? Page 1203, there's a chart. And he tells, when he say he, I'm talking about Professor Bernard Swartz on page 1203, the chart that everyone relies upon since 1971 says that Pennsylvania did not ratify Article the First, and Delaware did not ratify Article the First. Okay? So that means that 9 out of 13 states, because what we also don't talk about is, at the time, Connecticut, Georgia, and Massachusetts never reported any ratification. And how do we know that? Well, because Thomas Jefferson, and of course, once again, the devil's in the detail. According to the National Archives, this is Thomas Jefferson's ratification chart. Although the reality is it was probably prepared by either Henry Remsen or Roger Alden, his clerk. But it's attributed to Jefferson because it came out of his office. This is the actual chart where he kept track, kept count. Because someone's got to keep count. Because the Constitution's Article 5 says, once an amendment is proposed, it is valid for all intents and purposes when ratified. It doesn't say when ratified and people tap their head and do a dance. It doesn't say when ratified and some other further action is taken. And the reason why they did that is because it's a numbers question. You don't want to have someone that can frustrate the process by saying, no, we're not going to acknowledge this. But this is Jefferson's chart. Now, interestingly enough, Jefferson had Pennsylvania's ratifying Article first, which Professor Swartz says never happened. And Jefferson's chart also has New Hampshire's ratifying Article II, which Professor Swartz says never happened. Now, Jefferson was a pretty smart guy. And on the same page, in addition to this chart, there's a footnote. Because everyone always talks about, oh, well, when were the Bill of Rights deemed ratified? And there was a footnote by Professor Swartz, and I'm going to pass it around so you can look at it yourself. And it's an answer that says, first, and he quotes, he says, the amendments were ratified and declared ratified by Thomas Jefferson in a letter to the states in February 1792. And he cites, it says, first things first, Harper's Magazine, June 1963, page 43. This letter, officially announcing the ratification of the Bill of Rights, was sent by Jefferson as Secretary of State to the governors of the several states. I'm like, wow, so that's the answer. So Jefferson sent this letter saying they were ratified. The only problem with that is it's a lie. I'm going to pass around with the book. You can't make this up. I'm going to pass around with the book, page 43 from the 1963 Harper's Magazine. Let me read you the epic letter that Thomas Jefferson wrote that is referred to as the determinative document that determined and declared that the Bill of Rights were ratified. To the governors of several states, Philadelphia, March 1, 1792. Sir, and this was what was called a form letter sent to all governors of the then 14 states, because now by that point you had Vermont. Sir, I have the honor to send you herein enclosed 2 copies duly authenticated of an act concerning certain fisheries of the United States. Okay. and for the regulation and government of the fishermen employed therein, also an act to establish the post office and post roads within the United States. And also the ratifications by 3/4 of the legislatures of several states of certain articles in addition to an amendment of the Constitution of the United States proposed by Congress to the said legislatures, and it being with sentiments of the most proper and perfect respect, Your Excellencies, Thomas Jefferson. Okay.